T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Flight control, countdown confirmed.
I'm often asked, where am I from? To which I usually say, from here. At that point, they'll usually ask me, well, where are your parents from? To which I say, from here. Then the most persistent of them usually is a little confused, or they think I am, and they'll say, well, what's your heritage? Like, where's your family from? I usually take the opportunity to talk a little bit about history. See, my family didn't cross any borders. The borders crossed us. For 350 years before the US claimed the Southwest, there were interactions between the indigenous people of the Americas, Africans, and Europeans. These interactions gave rise to a whole new people that we insufficiently call Latinx or Hispanic. And if you were to answer the census, which I hope everybody does, you'll see that we are supposed to mark our race as Caucasian, ineffectually erasing our African and indigenous roots. But you can't erase that. It's part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. It's in our music. It's in our dancing. It's in our spirituality. It's in our food and in our medicine. And it's in our querencia, or our soul's desire for place. And if you want to engage the Latinx community on its environmentalism, you have to go to where it lives. Stopping climate change starts with the heart. In Spanish, there's a phrase, ¿y qué?, which literally means, and what? Or more specifically means, so what? So climate change, ¿y qué? Why does it matter? Why should climate change matter to the Latinx community? And why does the Latinx community matter to the larger climate change movement? Well, I could tell you that 80% of Latinos believe that climate change is happening. And I could tell you, too, that we are roughly 20% of the US population. We're also one of its youngest. The environmental community has long seen this opportunity and recognize that the future of the environment is intertwined with the future of the Latinx community. But the public, private, and nonprofit sectors are ill-equipped to adequately engage the Latinx community. It's because they continually and systematically undervalue our level of interest, passion, leadership, and innovation for this topic. When environmental groups transactionally seek our vote and not our leadership, they disregard the heritage of wisdom that we have. When governments label us as at risk or vulnerable, they disregard the resiliency in our story. In 1841, 3 men solicited the local prefect for 110,000 acres of Apache, Ute, and Pueblo hunting grounds. These 110,000 acres would be owned in collective by 35 families for agrarian purposes. One of those men was my 5 times great-grandfather. The land was awarded and the families began raising crops and animals and trying to make a life for themselves. Unfortunately, my great-great-great-grandfather's son had to petition for Congress and the Supreme Court to allow them to keep those lands following the Mexican-American War. He lost, and the families lost the lands that they had been working for decades. They were able, though, to keep the original homesteads where they built their houses. My grandmother remembers growing up on that homestead, carrying water and wood, and the gardens and the animals that were there. When I asked her how she could so vividly remember that time because she was just a small child, she says it was because it was the happiest times of her life. Now, her family, due to drought and the closing of the local mine, had to migrate north to Colorado. And despite the fact that she can trace her roots in New Mexico to 1708, she was greeted by signs that said, "No dogs or Mexicans allowed." And her family was forced to live on the east side of the tracks, in an area of town known as Ragtown in Eaton, Colorado. So even though they could grow and harvest the crops and clean their homes, they weren't allowed to be their neighbors. Now, this history of redlining that officially and unofficially began in the 1930s has reverberations today. These are our frontline communities for climate change. This is where we have food deserts and heat islands, and they're most likely to flood. These are areas with the worst air pollution and water delivered in pipes, in lead pipes. Now, I grew up in one of these red line neighborhoods in Denver. And while this story is my own, so much of it is not unique to me. This is something that's shared by many Latinx. But it is our inheritance to the natural land that unites us, that common agrarian, Indigenous, and African roots. Our familial ties acknowledge this natural inheritance and give us the responsibility to carry it forward for future generations. And you know what? You can't measure this in the guise of natural or of the white environmentalist movement. We may not be recycling like our white neighbors, but we are reusing items like crazy. And we may not be buying electric vehicles, but we're 50% more likely to walk or bike. And we carpool and use public transportation. And while we may not be buying organic foods, we're growing our calabazas and our chilies in the backyard if we're lucky enough to have one, or our cilantro in the window if we can't. This type of innovation and leadership and inheritance is something that is consistently dismissed. Our young leaders are nowhere to be seen on the common stage. And so even though we hear about Greta Thunberg, do we know about Shia Bastida or Jamie Margolin or Shutetska Martinez? And we always talk about grassroots organizing for the Latinx community, but we've had leaders at the head of the federal government, in the Departments of Interior, Energy, and Transportation, and Secretaries Ken Salazar and Federico Peña. And those neighborhoods that we like to marginalize on the front lines of climate change, they're not just victims, they're incubators of innovation. We have organizations like the Grow House that are using hydroponics to sustainably grow fish and food and teaching the community how to use that produce that they may not be familiar with. We have neighborhoods like Sun Valley that are eco-districts and are seeking to be net zero energy. So you can come and talk to us about electric vehicles and solar panels and leave discouraged because we may not have instantly adopted them. But it's because you're not speaking our language. And I don't mean Spanish. You're not talking to our hearts about la tierra, about the health of our water, our air, and our food. You're not talking about how we protect our sacred spaces. And you know what? If you want to get to us, you need to come to the heart, because that's where the Latinx community's passion for the environment lives. This isn't about language. This is about an orientation, a relationship to the environment. And this kind of orientation is longer lasting, it's deeper, and it's broader reaching. And that's good because we need it. The time is too short, and the need is too great for us to rely on the relatively small cohort of environmental champions that we have to date. This has to be a people's movement. And to be a people's movement, it has to live in the heart and less in the head. And this movement needs the Latinx community. And therefore, you have to engage us in the heart from where our motivation comes. It is time to stop talking to us about sustainability and climate change, and to start talking with us. It's time to be humble and to start asking us questions. What is our relationship to the air, the water, and the land, and our ancestors? Ask us what abuela ya lo sabe, what grandmother already knows. Ask us how we heal our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. Ask us what we would change if we could, and then help us to do that. It's time to stop recruiting us to your cause and to join and partner together in common causes. If you get to know us this way, you'll see that our passions and hopes and dreams aren't that dissimilar from your own. We are all relatives. In my Chicanx, Latinx community, we have to give ourselves permission to own our indigenous, our Black, and our agrarian roots. Because in this is our querencia, our inheritance of a love for the land. And this is our strength. And the climate movement needs this strength. Our ancestors, our young ones, and our future generations are counting on us. And it's their call that we will answer, because that is who we are. Now, if we want to stop climate change, we have to start with the heart. If we want to get in right relationship with the environment, we have to get in right relationship with the Latinx community. If we want to get in right relationship with the environment, we have to get in right relationship with the indigenous community. If we want to get in right relationship with the environment, we have to get in right relationship with the Black community. If we want to get in right relationship with the environment, we have to get in right relationship with the Asian community. To get in right relationship with the environment, we have to get in right relationship with each other. Stopping climate change starts with the heart. So let's connect to our own, and then to each other's. Omateo.